Hey baby, I hear the blues are calling, toss salads and scrambled eggs.
6 months ago, I was living in Boston. My wife had left me, which was very painful. Then she came back to me, which was excruciating.
You do not antagonize a man whose bumper sticker says, if you're close enough to read this, I'll kill you.
Because you are a big, beautiful dancing bear in a pink tutu that the students will actually pay attention to. That is why you are here.
Actor Kelsey Grammer, a 6-time Emmy Award winner most famous for portraying Dr. Frasier Crane in the long-running series Frasier,
I want my purse!
And I, my hand towel!
has had a very tumultuous life, to say the least. For most actors, the fame from acting can lead to problems like scandals or harassment allegations. But Kelsey's career was as marvelous as it gets. His iconic Dr. Crane was a recurring character in seasons 3 and 4 and became a regular in season 5 until the series finale in American season 11.
What happened to your hand?
I was so mad last night, I punched a raccoon.
Although his professional life was very decorated, it was behind the closed curtains that he suffered. His personal life was a harrowing and frighteningly lonely road. And as you'll see, things got worse for him before they ever got better. So let's explore the man's life behind one of the happiest faces on television. This is the story of Kelsey Grammer. Kelsey Grammer was born in the U.S. Virgin Islands, a relatively quiet place with a modest family. His father owned a bar and grill called Greer's Place, and for the most part, his days as an infant went relatively undisturbed. When Grammer was around 2 years old, however, his parents decided to separate, and he moved with his mother and sister to New Jersey, and then later to Florida. On the other hand, his father decided to stay on the islands, and it was during this time that Kelsey would have to compete for his father's attention. His dad decided to marry another woman and fathered several more children in the years following the separation. Left without any prominent father figure from an early age, Grammer was deeply attached to his grandfather, who raised and cared for him and his mother. But this reprieve would also be short-lived, as Grammer would lose him when he was just 11 years old. The 11-year-old didn't know just how much more misfortune he would have to endure over the next several years. While he didn't get to meet him often, Kelsey enjoyed his father's company when he had it, and would vie to live up to his expectations. It was a liberating feeling for a child like that to find comfort in the eyes of a parent. In 1968, he was robbed of that privilege when his father, Frank, was killed. In just 2 years, Grammer would lose the 2 patriarchs he had ever known. His father was killed by a taxi driver named Arthur B. Niles. The lunatic had set Frank's car on fire and then shot him twice as he ran outside to put it out. During the trial, Kelsey's mother, Elizabeth Grammer, testified that she pulled her husband's body from in front of Niles' car because he also threatened to run over him. Niles was described by the local news as a militant anti-white, believed to be mentally ill, and was kept in a psychiatric ward for many years. In 1994, he was set free, but ended up in jail in 2003 when he threatened a judge. And it was then that Grammer had finally received proper justice for his loving, albeit absentee, father. But this was hardly the last tragic death that he would come across in his life. Grammer and his family went through more heartbreak when the actor was just 20. In July 1975, Grammer's sister, Karen Grammer, was raped and murdered by 4 men. 2 men, Glenn, Corbett, and their 2 friends, had decided to rob the Red Lobster Karen worked at that night, but left the restaurant without any money when they came across Karen. They forced her into their car, stopped to rob a convenience store, and then drove her to their apartment where they took turns raping her for about 4 hours. Afterward, they put a cloth over her head, promising to take her home. They dumped her in a trailer park instead. According to testimony during the trial, Glenn had taken LSD, and when he got out of the car, he stabbed Karen in the back, on her hand, and the neck. He then drove away with his accomplices, leaving her for dead. But Karen was made of sterner stuff and managed to crawl to the back porch of a nearby home that had a light on. Unfortunately, no one was at home. Detectives describe a scene where Karen had left bloody handprints and fingerprints when she had tried to ring the doorbell. From her fingerprints, she was inches away from the doorbell when she passed out. Although, given no one was home, ringing it wouldn't have done her any good. But of course, she didn't know that. She died on that back porch and was not found until the next day. She was only 18 years old and died in one of the most horrific ways possible. But to make things even worse, for the boy who hadn't gotten over his father's murder, Kelly had to go to the morgue to identify her body. Freddie Glenn and Michael Corbett were quickly found guilty and initially put on death row, a decision that was later overturned. Corbett would eventually find the rest of his life in prison, where he also died in 2019. Glenn tried to seek parole several times, but the Grammer family ensured that nothing like that would ever happen. The last thing that the grieving family needed was for their daughter's killer to be roaming the streets a free man. This incident was also why Kelsey would become a strong advocate for the speedy justice of criminals on trial. In an interview with Vanity Fair, Grammer reflected on this horrific part of his life. He revealed that he told the parole board in 2009 that he misses Karen immensely.
She was a terrific kid. She was a wonderful, wonderful person. I miss her all the time.
And that he felt he was supposed to protect her as her big brother. He felt that somehow he was inadvertently responsible for her death. The fact that something like that could happen while he was her guardian is something that he has never forgiven himself for. If that wasn't already bad enough, 5 years after Karen's murder, on June 1, 1980, both of Kelsey's half-brothers died unexpectedly. The two boys, Stephen and Billy, were scuba diving off of St. Thomas at the time. Stephen went looking for him when Billy didn't return to the surface after the dive. Sadly, he died from an embolism he developed during his ascent. As for Billy, the brother he searched for, his body was never recovered. Kelsey was constantly bombarded with news of death and tragedy before he could even process or get over the previous ones. To cope with the inevitable depression and anxiety that ensued, Grammer got into drinking and drugs to cope with the pain he felt from the tragedies that plagued his early life. His drinking became a full-blown addiction, which has gotten so bad that he drank nearly daily. This unhealthy coping mechanism landed him in prison in 1990 for drunk driving. After several more run-ins with the cops due to his alcoholism, his family and friends began to grow concerned, and eventually he found himself in rehab. Luckily for Grammer, his Frasier co-stars knew he needed help and did everything they could to support him, even helping him keep up with his therapist during the filming on set. They even organized an intervention for their friend 3 years into the series. While it was hard for the rest of the show's cast because they weren't sure what to expect, the intervention worked. He voluntarily checked into the Betty Ford Center in 1996 to overcome his addiction and find a life of sobriety. Despite everything that had happened to him, he chose to stand and fight, and that had made all the difference. Regarding his personal relationships, drama is seemingly unavoidable for Kelsey Grammer. Grammer's first marriage was with Leanne Suhaney in 1993, and things were already off to a terrible start. The couple was expecting their first child when things took a turn for the worse. Grammer had filed a restraining order against Suhaney and sent her a notice demanding an annulment because things were supposedly not working out for the two. Suhaney, who was 3 months pregnant then, didn't take the news well and attempted to take her own life. Fortunately, she was rushed to a hospital and treated. However, the pregnancy was aborted a few days afterward. Any dreams he had of finding solace in his family were all but swept away, and given Kelsey's track record, he didn't take it very well. He had once again fallen into the depths of depression. In 2008, in the heat of the tumult of his condition, Kelsey Grammer went through a health scare when he suffered a heart attack. Luckily, it was nothing too severe due to the years of stress he had endured. He'd been married 3 times since then and endured plenty of heartbreak until he found peace with his 4th wife, Kate Walsh, whom he married in 2011. This was one of his life's quiet times, as things looked up for him. He had been through so much, and his life was in absolute shambles. Every step of the way, he had to watch as the hope of an everyday life trickled past him. But this was finally his time for redemption. His mental health was being pieced back together, and he had a family to turn to for support for the first time. Things were looking up for him. But even during the years that preceded his relationships, his life was still plagued by occasional bouts of scandal and death. Kelsey Grammer is a man who has every reason to be bitter and foster a disdain for society. But that's not what he did. He saw how his life turned out, and that the only hope people have of making it through pain and agony is through love and care. While we can't claim to understand the nature of what this man had to go through, we can at least still marvel at the fact that he could do so much with the gift of humor that God had given him. He found solace in making others laugh, and everyone is better off for it.